You may have wondered what my first job was. Anyone remember your first job? That's probably a little story I don't know if I've ever told. My first real job, besides, doing work for my grandfather and my dad, where you didn't get paid for that, but the first job I ever got paid for that I remember is being a busboy in a restaurant. It was the Holiday Inn in Newport, Tennessee, and yes, I know, big time. And I was a busboy in the restaurant. Now, here's what I learned about being a busboy, other than the fact that it's a lot of hard work, is that everything in that kitchen depends upon a rhythm. I didn't know that before, but everything, in order for the order to come up and hear the magic words from the chef, order up, everything had to work in a sequence. There had to be somebody who got the dishes cleaned at the right time, someone who set the tables at the right time, someone who brought, so from the time you walked in the restaurant, someone was seating you, someone was cleaning the table, setting the table, taking your order, filling the drinks. There was people in the kitchen, and it was really an amazing thing to watch. It was like watching the inner workings of clockwork because it was loud, it was noisy, but the thing that made it work is that everyone knew their place and everything was being done at the right time and the right place. And at the end, for a successful run, you would finally hear the chef say something like, "Order up." And when he would say "order up," that meant that everyone had done a good job, and then in a timely fashion, without losing a customer, we were able to serve fresh, hot food at the right time to that customer. Otherwise, if any delays, the food was hot, the order was wrong, there was no tables cleaned, any of those things could have gone wrong, and it would have messed up the priority of that restaurant, and that was keep happy customers by feeding them good hot food. Now, I learned that as a 16-year-old bussing tables because I realized that I could get in trouble if I was too slow bussing those tables because it depended upon me getting everything off and getting it to the dishwasher. I had to get everything off, clean the plates, and put it on the belt so that someone else could stack them, someone else could clean them, someone else could restack them. And if you've ever gotten a hot plate, that is a freshly cleaned plate. I figured that out real fast. So I learned a lesson as a teenage boy, as a 16-year-old boy, that order allows you to prioritize things and get what you want out of life. So if you want to grow up or if you want a relationship in your life to get better, one of the things that you may have to do is prioritize that relationship and put some order in your life. Put some disciplines and order in your life in order to prioritize that relationship. Otherwise, here's what happens. We end up living very chaotic lives. We end up living lives where we're just trying to get everything done that has to be done. We're always trying to get the deadlines done. The things to do list never ends. You finish one list and you got another one waiting on you, and we all know there's going to be something in the inbox on the day you die, right? That is just how life works. You're never going to get it all done. It's just absolutely impossible. So in a world that is filled with stuff and things and high demands, if I want something in my life to be important, I have to put an emphasis, and not only an emphasis, a priority. I have to put order in my life to make sure in all of my business I don't leave out the most important thing. Now, I'm amazed at how God put order in things. God put order in the universe, and the order that God put in the universe runs absolutely majestically every day. Now, I don't pretend to know all about the universe, but there's a few facts that I want to give you this morning and that I want us to just consider for a moment. Do you realize this about our planet? That the size of our planet is absolutely important to our existence, that if our planet was 10% larger or 10% smaller, it would not sustain life, that we could not sustain life on this planet. That the size of our planet is the precise size that will sustain life. Not only that, our planet is tilted on a 23% axis. Now, that may not sound important to you, but here's what would happen if we weren't tilted on a 23% axis and rotated on that axis. We would warm too fast, or we would freeze too fast, and we could not sustain life on our planet. we would either turn to ice or we would all burn up from being too close to the sun. But the tilt that we're on creates daylight and dark at just the right time. It creates a warming trend at just the right time. And what you see in our planet is this amazing clockwork where it takes 365 days for us to do this, but every 24 hours we do this. So our planet is spinning every 24 hours from daylight to dark, a spinning, rotating ball in the middle of the universe, but we're moving around our solar system for 365 days, and that's what we call a year. Well, God puts all of that in place, and along with so many other intricacies. For instance, do you realize that if just the chemistry of our atmosphere would change, that we would be pelted by meteorites from outer space, and we could no longer sustain them? Because we have something that is called an invisible shield. You know what that invisible shield is made up of? Gases. Those gases have to be, let me give you the exact, because these are fast facts you can look up real quick on me, so I want to make sure that I give them to you right. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other gases. And do you realize that the combination of those gases is what keeps these meteorites from hitting our planet? That these gases combined at just the right time create this, what we would call invisible shield, or the atmosphere that we breathe. And it is something that we couldn't breathe in, that it's 78% nitrogen, but what we have to breathe in is the 21% oxygen. Isn't it also something that these are not chemically mixed in an atmosphere and sprayed in the atmosphere? But God has designed that the moon is the thing, the pull of the moon creates the tide of the ocean. And the tide of the ocean is what stirs up these chemicals in the atmosphere. So God put the moon at just the right place so the ocean waters would pull at just the right time and create these waves. Otherwise, the earth would be one giant cesspool. But instead of that, the moon comes and pulls on the water of the ocean, and we create these waves. We get our wind currents. It puts oxygen down in the plankton, which is the beginning of our food chain. It also stirs up the atmosphere and makes it breathable for us. And all of that happens while we're just going about our daily routine. Every single solitary second of our life, there's this amazing order that God has put in place, and none of that can fail or we would not exist. So God put such an amazing priority on the things that have to happen in order for you and I to exist on this planet. But I think one of the most incredible illustrations of order is something that we see it in the Old Testament. We see the rhythm of God or the rhythm of the universe. We see the rhythm of divine order, the rhythm of life in so many ways. But here is a real simple illustration that has so much powerful spiritual meaning that I want to give you today, because it has to do with the tabernacle of God. And as you look at this, I want you to see how God designed a tabernacle on this earth that sets up a priority for many, many things. First of all, our spiritual priority in life, because you can look at the tabernacle and you can realize that you start at the outer court, you'll go all the way to the inner court. No matter how much you want to get to God, you have to start at the altar. That's the only place you can start. You can try to get to God any other place, but without going to the altar, you just can't get to God. Because the very first place, nobody bypasses anything. No one bypasses the brazen altar to get into the presence of God. So God put in this illustration for us, He set things in order. In particularly, He set lots of things in order for the tabernacle. He says that there has to be an outer court, there has to be an inner court, and there has to be a sacred court, or a holy of holies. And in those three courts, He also said the furniture has to be placed a certain way. You see 2 pieces of furniture on the outside. You see 3 pieces of furniture on the inside. 5 is the number of grace. That means you got to pass 5 things. You got to come to God by grace. And I mean, the story is told over and over and over. I got to tell you, there are 1,000 sermons I could preach just on the tabernacle alone. But today, I want you to see the people in the tabernacle. Today I want you to see a little different view of the tabernacle, because a lot of times when we talk about the tabernacle, we deal with worship or we deal with prayer and all those great spiritual truths, and all of that is a part of what we believe. We see the sacrificial animals that are brought to the Lord. We see the measurements of the tabernacle, the colors of the tabernacle, and you can preach so many great sermons and series on this. But today I want you to notice something different. I want you to notice the people at the tabernacle. Because God set up an order of relationships that have to function in order for everything to be done well or done right. First of all, there's the outer court. That's where the public can gather. Anybody that wants to can come to the outer court of the tabernacle. Then he set up an inner court. The inner court was run by a family called the Levites. They were all family, but they were also the priestly tribe. So no one could enter into the next court unless you were a priest. So God said, even though everybody's welcome at the altar and we meet all the public there, when it comes to building stronger relationships, even spiritual relationships, the crowd gets smaller. So the Levites were people who were chosen by the Lord to come into the inner court. But then look at the next court, the sacred court, or the Holy of Holies. Only one man could go into that place at a time. So when you look at the people of the tabernacle, I want you to get this, that if your life is established in a spiritual order, a divine order, you cannot be all things to all people all the time. That there are some people in your life that you have to prioritize in order to give them extra time or private time or different types of quality time than you do everybody else. So we're going to talk for a moment about these three courts and what they represent in relationships in our life. First of all, if you want to define the word priority, priority simply means something that you think about prior. It just means that I've given prior attention to this. It's something that I chose to think about and put something in place to make sure I don't forget it. If I prioritize my time, that means I keep a schedule. If I prioritize my diet, that means I have to buy the right food or I will end up eating the wrong food, right? So if I prioritize my health, that means I have to get on an exercise regimen. And that means that I have to decide what I'm going to do to prioritize my health. So prioritizing God or prioritizing people, if I prioritize my marriage, that means that I've thought of it ahead of time, and these are all the things I'm going to put in place to make sure that my marriage is strong. If I prioritize my family, my children, my grandchildren, that means that I have to think about it ahead of time and decide, how am I going to make sure that I don't run so fast in this life that I don't have time for them? How can I make sure that I have time for them? If I prioritize reading, then I say I read on certain days. I'm reading this certain book. I'm not just going to read when I'm in the mood to read. I'm not just going to read. You can't just be in marriage when you're in the mood for marriage. You can't just be in friendship when you're in a good mood. Have you ever met people before that it seems like that they don't get in bad moods, they just get in good moods? It's like stay in a bad mood, and every now and then it's like, all right, they're in a good mood. Let's go eat somewhere. Today's the day. Yeah, you can't do friendship like that. You can't do relationship like that. As a matter of fact, what you have to do is you have to decide that if these relationships are going to be important in my life, I have to think about it prior to anything happening and make sure that I schedule them in. If I'm going to be a man of prayer, I've got to schedule my prayer in. I can't just pray when I have time. How many of you know you never have time to pray? Prayer is hard work to start with. You're never going to have time to pray. You have to make a regimen of prayer. You have to decide. You have to have a discipline of prayer. You have to decide, this is when I pray. I have a date with God, and I'm not breaking the date, because if I don't show up, He's still going to be there waiting on me. So I have to have order in my life in order to accomplish the things that I'm trying to do with my life. So let's look at, first of all, the public place, the outer court. Now, I want to use Jesus' type of ministry to show you how this overlays in relationship. Because in this outer court, you've got the public, you've got the priestly place, and you've got the private place. You've got the Holy of Holies. Notice in the ministry of Jesus that he prioritized relationships the very same way. Jesus was always ministering to the public. but he did not tell all the parables or reveal parables in the public. As a matter of fact, he didn't let the public see him on the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus prioritized relationships by saying, this is what I'm giving to the public, but this is what I'm giving to my family. His family, in this case, is not necessarily blood kin. He did have family like that, but he also chose this family of 12 disciples. For you, family may be your immediate family. Maybe you don't have room for a lot of relationships outside of that right now. And that's okay, because your life moves in seasons. And you're going to find that out. There's a lot of relationships that are great in one season that just take up a lot of time that you may be given to a different priority in another season of your life. You don't need to feel guilty about that. Life is going to move in seasons on you. That's just how it happens. But the thing you got to look at is that my inner circle of relationships, that middle compartment, are the people that have been chosen, that I've chosen, that I'm going to be closer to. So these might be my good friends. This might be my life group. This might be my staff. This might be other people in my life that I want to have a good relationship with them. So Jesus said, I'm going to give everything that I can to the public, but I am going to pour myself into these 12 disciples. But how many of you can name the 3 that got closer to Jesus than the 12? There was always 3, and he was always alone with them someplace else. And you know who they were, right? Let's say it together. Peter, then John. That's right. So we know that story because Peter, James, and John did not have the same type of relationship with Jesus as the other 12 disciples. They all had a great relationship, but it was Peter, James, and John that prayed with Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane. It was Peter, James, and John that was with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. It was Peter, James, and John that saw him in his glory, and they saw Moses and Elijah and on the mountaintop. It was Peter, James, and John that got to hear prayers that the other disciples did not get to hear. They got to see miracles that the other disciples didn't even get to see because they were a part of the private life of Jesus Christ. Now here's what I want you to see. You only have so much room in your life for relationships. So you have to decide that in your relationships, I have to decide how am I going to make the most important relationships in my life important. Otherwise, here's what happens. We just live our life by demand. We just live our life by course. We live que sera, and we just live our life going 90 miles an hour on a treadmill we can't get off of, and then we realize, wow, I haven't talked to this person in a week. I haven't seen them. I haven't sent them a text or talked to them on the phone. We haven't had prayer. Maybe it's your spouse, and you think, when is the last time my spouse and I had prayer together? When is the last time I read the Bible to the kids? When is the last time that I took the time to be the spiritual leader of my house? When is the last time that we gathered around a family altar and prayed? Or when's the last time I just took my wife out on a date? Or when's the last time I cooked my husband's favorite meal? Or when is the last time that I went out with this friend that I don't want to lose relationships with because they're so important to me? When is the last time that we just went out by ourselves and had some quality time? Keep this in mind. There is a part of your public life that is going to be public, but the public will move in and out of your life all the time. That is the part of your life that is forever going to change. Now, you can't avoid the public life. You need a public life. Everybody needs a public life. Let me read to you a quick stat that Pastor Joe actually shared with us the other day at our staff chapel that I thought was so great. I had to write that down. But listen to this stat. I may have to get him to tell you since I can't find it. I thought I wrote it down. Well, let me give it to you. I think I can remember most of it. Here we go. Americans are among the loneliest people in the world, according to the Gallup poll. Listen to this. Most architects currently design homes intentionally to promote privacy and seclusion, not connection. Where we used to have front porches and we capitalized on those front porches, that's where we met everybody and talked to everybody. Now we have garages that are positioned on the side of our house, and we like to nose into the garage so that we don't run into anybody. Close the garage door and find seclusion in our house. And a lot of Americans today don't even know their own neighbors as a result of that we never connect with each other. Here's the rest of that stat. Researchers have found that isolated people are 3 times more likely to die than those who have strong relationships. People with bad health habits, that means smoking, poor eating, obesity, alcohol, and drug use, but they have strong social ties. They've got other people in their life, encouragement. They even live significantly longer than those who have great health habits but choose isolation. Wow. How many of you know that God created us to need each other? So we cannot hide from the world and be healthy. We have to interact and learn from each other. We have to have people that relieve our worries, and people that help us understand ourselves, and people that affirm us, and people that can laugh with us, and people that can rejoice with us, people that can mourn with us. We have to have a group of people around us who can pray with us. But there is a part of your life that is just going to be that. It is just going to be public, and you can come to church. But can I tell you that you can come to church and still get lonely? You can come to church and hide in this great big group of people, and you can go through all the songs but leave without a friend and just come and worship and go home and be lonely all week long. But that is not going to help your life be healthy. So you and I have to make a choice. When I leave the public court, the outer court, who goes with me? Who's my family? Now, that family may be people related to you, and it may just be people that you're close to. You know, my wife and I have lived in St. Louis now almost 25 years. We have no relatives here. Our closest living relative, I did find out that Phyllis Rapini might be a distant cousin. So I'm thrilled to hear that. I'll call her Cousin Phyllis every time I see her. So we happen to be from the same small town in Tennessee, which I couldn't believe that. But for the most part, we've lived our whole life here without one relative of a person that we were kin to. So you know what we've done? We've just made a family out of friends and family and people we're close to. Now, you have to choose, and you have to choose how many people you have time for in that circle. Because here's what happens. You cannot treat family the same as you treat the public. Here's the thing you need to understand about this inner circle. There was food there. There was candles there. There was aroma there. There was atmosphere there. When you go into the next part of relationship with God, it creates more intimacy in the next level than you have out in the public court. So you have to choose, how many people do I have room for? How many people do I have time for? And then you have to make those people in your life a high priority in your life. Several years ago, I was concerned about my schedule, and this was when our church was probably running maybe like 300 or 400 people at that time, and I don't think I've ever been busier in any season of my life than then, because it was just so much to do and so many demands that there was just no way to ever get them all done. And we just didn't have a lot of staff then. We had a handful of elders, but not the 30-plus elders that we have now that help us. You know, we just didn't have the manpower to do that. So it consequently, fell upon me to do a lot of the things in the church. And I remember in that time, I was so afraid that I was going to neglect my wife and I was going to neglect my kids. And I didn't want to be one of those pastors, because there are some out there that they have great ministries, but their kids hate God. And their kids hate ministry because they've never seen their dad. They've never seen their families. Pastors' wives who because there's no job description for them, everybody wants them to be their type of spiritual woman. And so, the pastors' wives are one of those entities that they never really can know where they fit, because to everybody, they should be a different type of spiritual woman. And to this person, you should be a prayer warrior. To this person, you should be a worshiper. To this person, you should be a missionary. To this person, you should be a ladies' auxiliary president. And you just never can meet the demand. So it's absolutely impossible. So I was worried that, okay, what if in this season of my life, I have all this great ministry and I lose out on the most important relationships in my life? At that time, I wanted to be a writer, and I didn't know where I was going to find time to write. So I read a couple of books that began to change my course of life. A book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, another book called First Things First. Stephen Covey wrote those books. And when I read those books, the Lord just used pieces of those books
to help me prioritize something. Now, some of you who are with me and on my staff, I know Loretta and some of those who worked with me in this season, Tammy Florence, some of those in that time, you remember this notebook. I was married to this thing. I literally had this binder that I would never let leave my side. This was back in the Covey organizational calendar days. And before electronics, pre-electronics, 3-wing binder stuff, and it really did work great. And but I'm moving forward. I'm not stuck. But I got to tell you that what I would do every day or every Monday of my life is I would set a goal, and in those goals I would say, here's one thing I'm going to do with my wife to strengthen my relationship this week. Here's one thing that I'm going to do with my children to strengthen my relationship this week. Here's one thing that I'm going to do as a pastor, as a spiritual goal to strengthen my relationship with God this week. Here's one thing that I'm going to do. And I set 7 goals every single week for myself. And literally, I lived a regiment of this for a number of years because I did not want any of my relationships to fall by the side. The only reason I'm giving you that illustration from my life is because I'm telling you, those who are the busiest have to pay the closest attention to the things you're neglecting. And sometimes we get so crazy running in our schedules. We have children today whose schedules are crazier than adults' schedules were. And we think that if they don't play on every team, we're going to warp them somehow. We might warp them if they do. Because every now and then families need to turn off the TV and just sit and have a conversation. Every now and then we need to open up the Bible and just tell about Noah and the ark. Every now and then we need to turn on a radio and sit on the back porch in the rain and just listen to some good music with a hot cup of coffee and hold somebody's hand and not say a word. Sometimes you just have to build in the important moments of your life, or otherwise you're going to pass like ships in the night. And one day you're going to wake up and you're going to look in the back seat of your car, and through the rearview mirror you're going to see strangers sitting in the back seat that all have your last name. And if you're not very careful, it's so easy not to lose relationships with my children, but to lose relationship with one of my children. I can't just play with the boys or play with the girls and think that I am a good father when I haven't sit down one-on-one. I can tell you this, and I'm not bragging, but if you want to know about it, ask my kids, they'll tell you. Do the same thing. I've told people for years I'm the king of estrogen. I have grown up in a house full of women. It was new to me because I grew up with boys my whole life, but got married to Faith, had 2 daughters, got 2 granddaughters. Brittany has a dog, and that dog's a girl. Thank God for Jeff. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Growing up in a house full of women is a lot different than what I was used to. And I realized that girls, you got to date girls. And I realize now you still got to date girls. So I still date Faith, and I still date Lindsay, and I still date Brittany, and I still date Macy, and I still date Brooklyn. And you know who else I dated before she passed? I know some of you are going to look at me strange, but it's the truth. Ask my wife. I dated her mother. I know. That's either cool or crazy, but I liked it. When Faith's father passed, I saw this beautiful woman that was in my family, and she was all alone. Her name was Dorothy. And I'd say, Dorothy, I'd like to take you on a date tonight. I'd show up at the front door because I am a gentleman. I'd show up at the front door. I'd have to walk out the side door to get to the front door. Walk out the front door. I'd ring the doorbell. I'd hold up a rose. I'd kiss her on the cheek. I'd open the car door. I'd put her in the car, take her on a date, bring her back home, open up the car door, kiss her on the cheek, tell her good night, walk around the side door and go back in the house. You know why? Because it was important. If you are going to have relationships in your life, you have to order them. You don't order them up, life will order them down. And you have to decide which relationships are most important. And here's the thing you need to understand about this, and we're going to move on to the last one. In this compartment of the tabernacle, everything had to be maintained daily. So you need to ask yourself, if I really want these relationships to be important, can I make a daily connection with them, or at least a weekly connection with them, in order to show them that they're important? Here is the inner court. If you want to have an inner court relationship, an inner circle relationship with friends or family, you have to decide today, this person is more important than the public. I'm going to give my life to the public, but this person is more important than the public, and I'm going to prioritize this relationship in my life. And then there's the sacred relationships. I don't know if you've ever stopped and thought about that before, but I hope that you do today. Obviously, when we talk about sacred relationship, the most important one is God. And I every time I prioritize my life, and I always do it in the fall of the year, so I just got through doing that. I just got through, making my plan for next year and all the goals I want to accomplish. As a matter of fact, I set a 10-year goal for myself. And in doing that, I was looking at all the things I want to accomplish and all the goals that I want to accomplish. And I've lived my life pretty much trying to do this, or trying to prioritize things in my life. And I always do the same thing every time. It's automatic. God, and then faith, and the kids, and the church, and right down the list. And I got to look at that list this time. And I said, Lord, I need to apologize. I say that you're the most important relationship in my life. But I wonder sometimes if you feel that way. I know I feel that way. I'm serving you, but relationship's not just about serving you. It's about relationship, walking with you in the cool of the day. I try to check in with God every day of my life, and I've got a schedule where I can do that, and every morning of my life, I take out time for God every single day. But I found myself sometimes more of salesman. Okay, God, now you know we need this, and you know we need this, God, and you know, just come on, God, help me out here just a little bit. That's not relationship. Sometimes I just need to say, you're the altogether lovely one. You're the glory and the lifter of my head, my shield, my buckler, my strength, my fortress, the one that I can trust. God, I just want to spend the morning telling you how beautiful you are. I just want to spend the morning telling you how good you've been to me, Lord. I don't want to ask for anything today. I just want to thank you for your power. I want to thank you for your presence. I want to thank you that I'm not who I could have been or should have been or ought to have been. I want to thank you, God, that I have lived down labels and I've lived up to callings, and there's so many things in my life that I could have never done without you. I want to tell you, you're never going to see a revival in a church until individuals have a personal revival in their soul. It all starts there. It isn't something church can do for us. Revival is very personal. It's one fire that another person catches onto that fire, and another person catches onto that fire, and then the next thing you know, there's a flame that is burning, and there's a brush fire that is started. That's revival. Revival isn't a series of meetings with preachers and singers. Revival isn't coming out every night at 7 o'clock, praying a little, singing a little, and preaching a lot. That's not revival. Revival is when I am absolutely in love with Jesus Christ on the inside, that no one has to prompt me to worship him. Or I love reading my Bible and I stop at a red light and I just want to squeeze in one more verse because I'm so in love with the Lord and my relationship with him is personal. So can I tell you this? That if you really want the most important relationship in your life to be the most sacred relationship in your life, it requires something. It requires alone time. As a matter of fact, every sacred relationship in your life requires alone time. Those of you who are married, you cannot have a good marriage without alone time. It's not God's design. It's not God's plan. You have to have times when you're vulnerably alone to build intimacy. There's got to be times that you put everything else aside. You get babysitters. And I understand you young couples in that season of your life. I've come through that. I understand that. There is just no time left. There's no energy left. There's no, you're just so busy. Raising small children is the most joyous thing in the world, also the most exhausting thing in the world. But it's the most joyous thing in the world. But I get it. But can I tell you something? Don't let that be an excuse for neglecting one another. You have to realize that some relationships in your life are not just important, they're sacred. And if they're sacred, then I have to take them. You know something about this tabernacle that amazes me is that in every one of these places, there is an altar. You got a brazen altar for the public. You got an altar of incense for the middle place. And you've got the mercy seat of God, the ultimate altar in the presence of God. If any relationship in your life is truly sacred, there will be times that you're going to pray together. There are going to be times that you worship together. There are going to be times that you just come into God's presence together. And without that, you cannot have sacredness in that relationship. But you also have to decide this. If this is going to be the most important and the most sacred relationship in my life, when? Everybody say when. When are we going to be alone? I don't mean 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock. No. You know what the rules were for the high priest? Check in the morning, check in the evening, and come in once a year and stay a while. The Day of Atonement. That was it. So here's my plan for all of you wanting a sacred relationship. Check in the morning. Check in the evening. And at least, minimally, once a year, go away by yourself. Get alone. Get to know each other. Whisper in each other's ear. You say, okay, now you're talking about married folks. Okay, then let's break it on down. How about single people? What's the most important relationship? What's the friendship in your life that you cannot live without? Check in the morning. Check in the evening. And once a year, find some time. If it's a bunch of girls going on a shopping spree, or a bunch of guys going on a deep-sea fishing trip, or to a ball game somewhere besides Alabama. If it's something like that in your life, if you want relationships to be sacred, they have to be priority.